I remember the first hop tone I ever heard was a call where a dad had found a 20-year-old with a 14-year-old daughter. We zip over to the house. The kid had got into a fight, and the guy runs out the back. So we are now searching for the guy. I'm out there armed with a flashlight and courage, walking around in the desert. I see an old abandoned travel trailer, and inside of it was a bunch of trash and debris. And I look inside, and amongst all that trash and debris, I see what I think is a quarter size of skin. And so they go in there and they move all the stuff, and sure enough, he's there. And they grab him, they tase him, they put him in cuffs. And I went home that morning and I woke my wife up and I said, honey, I'm going to be a cop.
I'm Steve Murphy, DEA Special Agent retired and now host of the Game of Crimes podcast. If you've seen the Netflix series Narcos, then you know my story. I now bring you stories of heroism and bravery from our law enforcement and military heroes, and occasionally from the criminals that they faced. Welcome to Game of Crimes. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the morning. Folks, thank you so much for continuing to come back every week. I truly appreciate you and your support. If you haven't checked us out on Patreon yet, go to patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Come over and look at some of the serious and silliest stuff we do over there, because it's a lot of funny people over there that like to have fun. Also on Patreon, you get 4 days advance audio access to all our episodes before they're available to everyone else. So just come over and check it out. You can actually join for free, and you get the first 5 minutes of every Patreon episode just to see what you think. So come on over. That's patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Today, we've got a guest that I really don't think needs a lot of introduction. He was a retired law enforcement professional from Arizona. I'm so honored to have him on here, and I didn't even tell him that yet, but this is a true honor to have him on the show. He worked as a uniformed police officer, then he went over to be a deputy sheriff, and then he got elected sheriff. Holy cow, now he's retired. I'm pretty sure you'll recognize him when I bring him up here. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mark Lamb to Game of Crimes. Sheriff, welcome, brother.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. And this is an honor for me, too. What a true legend in our profession, especially combating the drugs and the cartels and all that. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for saying that, buddy. I'm telling you right now, though, I'm not going to send you any money for that, okay? People think I have to pay people to say good things about me, and my wife especially thinks that. But no, we're going to have some fun today, everybody. Folks, you know that we usually start off with small-town police blotter, and there's so much I want to talk to the sheriff about that I was going to forgo that. And then I came across an article from our beloved Sheriff Grady Judd over in Polk County, Florida. You folks know I'm in Orlando, and Sheriff Judd is just a legend himself. And Mark, I got to read this one quick story.
Because I love Grady Judd. If it's a Grady Judd story, I promise you it's going to be good.
It's hilarious. I mean, and you know what? I thought what I like about him is he speaks his mind. He's not afraid to say what's on his mind.
That's right.
So, according to Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, Matthew Zaccarino, 39 years old, of Altamont Springs, Florida, was sitting in a vehicle by himself at a construction site last month. Okay, that's a little strange. When deputies approached, they said he was wearing, get this, a red lace bra with prosthetic silicone breast. And the sheriff says, then we noticed he was wearing a G-string showing off the boys, if you know what I mean. Judd went on to explain that it's hard to know how dangerous these situations are because under the prosthesis, deputies found a gun. What a place to hide a gun, right? The sheriff said that Zaccarino claimed he was going to a costume party, but when asked where the party was, of course, he stopped talking at that point. And the sheriff says, can you imagine? He's mad at us for trying to find out why he's wearing lace bras with guns and G-strings. And then Judd says it was ugly. Oh, so ugly. Zaccarino was charged with armed trespassing with a firearm, loitering or prowling, and resisting an officer without violence. So I just couldn't let that pass. Sheriff Judd, we appreciate you, brother. We know that you run unopposed over there, and that means the citizens of the county love you, and they love what you're doing, and Game of Crime supports you here.
Oh, he's great. He had one recently where it was somebody got catfished, and he showed the picture, and it was clearly a man pretending to be a woman, hideous. And Grady Judd gets up there in the press conference and puts that picture up there and just blasts him. But I mean, look, this is why people love Grady Judd, because he is authentic. He just gives it to the people. And that's what people love. And that's what we tried to do at our sheriff's office for a long time. We just tried to really show what the sheriff's office was and how we did our job. And I think people appreciate it. And Grady Judd really is one of the leaders in that.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into more in your career as a sheriff, but our regular listeners have heard me talk about this before. In law enforcement, we are public servants. That means that we have chosen to dedicate our lives to serving the public. I mean, there's no greater calling. If you look in the Bible, it says, there's no greater calling than laying down your life for another. So some people look at that term as a derogatory term. I don't. I look at it as a heroic term. The fact that you and I and all the other law enforcement professionals out there have dedicated their life to serving their fellow man. I just got to throw that out there. And as you'll see, Sheriff, I go off on tangents here every once in a while, so just bear with me.
It's all right. We call it weaving, right? It's weaving. As long as you come back to the point, that's what matters.
That's it. This is going to be a lot of fun today, ladies and gentlemen. I think you probably already see that. So, Sheriff, if you would just quickly, or not quickly, at your own speed, these episodes are all about you and your life. Tell us about your growing up, your background, your family dynamics, where you grew up. I know you've got a pretty adventuresome lifestyle. Going to school, did you play sports? What did mom and dad do? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm as American as you get. I'm a descendant of 8 of the occupants of the Mayflower. The Lamb side that I come from came to Boston on the Winthrop fleet in 1630, 10 years after the Mayflower. And so my family on most levels has been here since the 1700s. So when people say, where do you come from? I say, I'm American. I don't know. It runs deep in this blood. My dad was so my family's been pioneers of the West and since the mid 1800s and especially here in Arizona. But my dad was a graduate of Thunderbird Business College. So he loved international business. If you don't know, Thunderbird is probably one of the premier international business schools. And so my dad had lived in Trinidad and Tobago before. Well, then we ended up in Hawaii. My dad was a potato farmer in Hawaii and on the Big Island. And so I was born and raised on the Big Island in Hawaii. And then we moved to the Philippines when I was 11. We lived in Manila, which was great because it taught us about how great America was. We learned about poverty, but we also learned just how good and decent other people are throughout the world too. And then we moved back to Arizona, had to regroup. And so came back to Chandler, Arizona, which is where my dad went to high school. I played baseball there, which is one of the reasons why I didn't want to full on move to Panama when my family moved to Panama. So I stayed going to high school. My dad was always in Panama. My mom was back and forth. And my sister and I spent a lot of time, just she and I, during my high school years at home. And but I would spend all my other time in Panama. And so I spent a lot of time in Panama. Then I served a mission for my church in Argentina. I served in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And then I got married and went back to Panama and lived in Panama with my wife. On a professional level, I've always just been interested in business like my dad was. I had some successes. Had some that were not as successful. I don't think anything's a failure. I think you either learn from it and grow from it. But I think anytime you're trying to do something, making quantum leaps, you learn from it. So you just have less success in certain things. And so I don't know how far you want to go, but, that's where I was before I became a cop. I was married quickly. I had 5 kids in 6.5 years. So by the time I was 30, I had 5 kids. Really wanted to be in the military. And just kind of missed that opportunity. I didn't love people telling me what to do. So I ended up foregoing that. Next thing you know, I was married with kids. And so I actually looked at doing it when I was probably in 2001, right after 9/11. I started looking heavily at getting into the military. But financially, I just couldn't make it work with 6 small children. And so I kind of had to let that go. And I think that there was something in me that just really had a draw to public service and serving my country. And so as I moved away from that, I still had that void that deep inside of me, I was trying to fill. And so no matter what business I did, I just never felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. And so that's a quick snapshot of my life. I've been all over the place. I wrote a book. My first book was called American Sheriff: Traditional Values in a Modern World. And the first chapter is Welcome to America. And I talk about just what a great country we live in and how beautiful it is and freedom. And you can live in all these beautiful countries, and there's so many of them have so much to offer, but they are not America. And every time you come back, you will kiss the ground when you get off that plane. For all our faults, this is the best country.
You know, I was stationed in South America there for 3 years, and it's exciting. I love the country of Colombia. It's beautiful. The people are they're proud of their country. If you go in and act like an ugly American, they'll treat you like an ugly American. But if you come in and try to get along, they'll bend over backwards to help you. It amazed me. But I tell you what, later in life in my career, I was offered to be promoted up to another rank and go back to Colombia and be the boss in charge of Colombia and a couple other countries down there. I told the administrator at the time, what that did for me living in Colombia for 3 years made me appreciate living in the United States. And I have no intentions of ever living anywhere else. I love visiting other countries around the world, but man, you're right. There's no place like home. If I was king of the world or king of the United States for whatever amount of time, I would require every American to go live in a third world country for at least a year and then see if you want to come back.
It's funny you should say that. It's funny you should say that, because in my book, in that first chapter, I say, look, I'm not a proponent of government programs. I think they usually are wrought with fraud and not great. But as we can see, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I said the best program that you could implement is at the age of 18, every American has to go live 1 year outside of this country. You can pick the country you want to go to. You can go to the Bahamas. You can go to Japan. You can go anywhere in the world. Because I promise you, every American would love this country, and we'd have the political landscape and where we're at as a country, the division would look very different if we all had spent at least 1 year outside the country. So I'm with you on that. It would be the most fruitful government program you could implement.
I agree. The one thing, if you'd gone to the military and left your wife with 6 children, I don't think you'd have a wife when you came back.
She's a pretty good woman. I don't think she's about as good as she's an excellent woman. She is amazing. But you're right. It would have put too much stress on her. It would have put too much stress on the kids. And, I'm really driven by God, and where we like to take time and through prayer and consideration and really look and see if it feels right. And in the end, we couldn't make it feel right. And so we continued to move down the path we were on. And I had some not successes in the area, and I had to make some major life changes again. And ultimately, that's what led me into the profession I got in.
Right. And I think, first of all, I think the good Lord is not going to strap us with anything that we cannot handle. Second of all, I think he has to teach us patience, because I'm still learning that at my age. I'm still trying to learn patience. But it just all works out. I'm not a believer in luck or coincidence. I believe everything happens for a reason here. So that's my sermon for the day, everybody.
And I don't pray for patience. Don't pray for patience. If you pray for patience, boy, watch out. Strap in. Put in your mouthpiece, because it ain't going to be fun. So I don't pray for patience.
Be careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, when you did your missionary trip, are you 18 years old at that point?
So back then you were 19. And so I had a year. I played a little college baseball, went to school in St. George, Utah at a college. It used to be called Dixie College, but they've since changed that. It's like, I don't know, Southern Utah, something or another. But so I had a year, and then I spent half of it in college, half of it in Panama, because I graduated just before I was 18. So I had a full year before I could even go on my mission. And I pretty much went on my mission. I think 3 days after I turned 19, I was on my mission. And so, Yeah, and back then there was no cell phones, no computers, no email. They just throw you to the wolves. Whether you speak the language or not, you're going to figure it out real quick.
I've got a couple of friends that have been repeated guests here on the show, and are just longtime friends now that did missionary work through Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yep.
And they say the same thing. Man, you go down, you got to learn the language while you're there. You got to live off the land. You have to live on the good graces of your host country there, of the people. God bless you. Did you have any choice into which country you went to?
No, you just put it in and they tell you where you go. So my oldest brother went to Puerto Rico. My other brother went to Ecuador. And then I got sent to Argentina. And so it's weird, though, because you get there and you learn Spanish for 2 months in an MTC, a missionary training center in Utah. And then so that's your exposure. And luckily I had lived in Panama, so I was somewhat familiar with it. But Argentine Spanish is very different. And so I get to Argentina and I've got this companion and he's a little red-headed, red-cheeked Italian Argentine. And first generation Argentine, and he doesn't speak a lick of English. And I get sent to the country, so nobody in the town speaks English either. And so I remember one of the first days I was with him, somebody asked me, you learn in Spanish, what is your name is como se llama or como te llamas. And I get to Argentina and the first day they're like, ¿Y vos cómo te llamas? And I'm like, what? What did he? And then the Argentine guy's like, su nombre, quieren saber su nombre. They want to know your name. And I was like, man, I don't even understand that. I'll never make it here. So it was a learning experience, man. I'll tell you what, that's an odd feeling going someplace and not understanding and having to just really just dive in and figure it out.
Yep. But you know what? You see, like the guys I'm talking about was Aaron Turner and Tyler Schwab. Both are successful. You're obviously successful. I think that's probably a great learning lesson, and it shows you that, yeah, you're not all that in a bag of chips.
That's right.
You can succeed in the environment. You just have to apply yourself, which, I think that's a good learning lesson for people nowadays, young people especially. When you were in Panama at age 17, there was a significant event down there. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we were there for Christmas and we'd gotten there and tensions were rising. Noriega was now on the bad list with Bush Sr. And it was not going well. And they had some elections and there were some old things. And then they had actually attacked a soldier and his wife. And so things were really escalating. You could feel the tension. I was not a military guy. So my dad was a businessman. We had a contract with the Panamanian government for all the scrap metal. And we were doing a few other businesses. So I was there I just lived in Panama City. We lived in a place called Punta Paitilla, which is on the other side of Old Panama. It's across the bay. And so we lived on the point, and so we could see all of Old Panama. And so we were cautious because we knew that the tensions were rising. We went to bed on the 20th, December 20th or 19th. At about 1:00 in the morning on the 20th, my mom woke me up and she said, Mark, they're bombing. So I get out of the bed and I run out to the balcony, and sure enough, like boom, boom, bombs are, they're just lighting up Old Panama. And so that I run around to the other sides because our apartment had 4 sides to it. And so you could see from all different sides. And so I run over and I could see a serious firefight going on where the Paitilla airstrip was, which is where the Navy SEALs that were killed ended up dying. And then I run over to the other side and you see some more gunfights. And then I run and I look over the balcony on one side and I can see a limousine down at the bottom of our apartment building, and somebody's loading an RPG into the trunk of it. What they were doing was they were actually taking Americans from our building. And they had actually taken a guy they believed to be CIA who was there as that he was doing, he was teaching at the university, but they thought he was CIA, and maybe they were right. 3 days later, I think they found that guy dead in a ditch. but the power went out before. So they were on the 4th floor. We were the next set of Americans on the 10th floor, and the power went out. And so they never made it up to our floor. Who knows what would have happened, but I'm sure they probably thought we were CIA too, because anybody down living in Panama, they probably just assumed that. And luckily for us, they didn't make it up. But here's the thing, you didn't see the military for 4 days. So the military didn't have time to go around all these buildings and check in on everybody. And the looters were coming in and stealing from buildings and, roughing people up and killing people. And then the Dignity Battalion, which was Noriega's henchmen, they were going around and still kidnapping and doing all that. And so the residents of the building got together and said, hey, we got to protect ourselves. And so everybody said, who has guns? And all the people that had guns brought the guns down. And I spent the next 4 days as a 17-year-old standing with a gun for a 6-hour shift at a time, trying to keep people from coming into our building. And I'll tell you what, I remember one time over the radio, they were saying, hey, they're coming. The Dignity Battalion's coming. And I just remember thinking, and I was very familiar with guns. And at one of the points I had a lever action is what they had given me, holding. But I had a lever action at home. It was my first gun. I was very into cowboy guns. So I was like, look, I'm going to lose to an AK-47, but I'm going to at least shoot one of them before that happens. And so that was 17 years old. And once again, it's one of those experiences that where you appreciate. Most Americans, they go around, they run their mouths because they've never really experienced instability like what you see across the world. And so even as our government is jacked up as it is, and all these politicians, these horrible politicians we still have stability in this country where women can walk in the street for the most part, and people don't have to worry about, being attacked overnight or like by another army or something. And so once again, we learned some really valuable lessons. And when we finally made it back, we were stuck in Panama for a bit. And then when I finally made it back to Arizona, boy, I'll tell you what, you want to kiss the ground because you just are very appreciative of the life that we have here.
Absolutely. Now, so did they evacuate you out of Panama?
So no, because I wasn't military. So, I had a plane ticket home and we missed our flight because they had the airport shut down. And then when we finally did get a chance to get out of there, it took us 8 hours. So we had to go somewhere. They checked our bags. The military was running the airport, the American military. And they checked our bags and they put us all on buses. And then when we got there, we had to sit on all these seats and we had to lay our bags out and open them up. And all the canines, a drug canine, a weapons canine, an explosive canine, all came through and sniffed our bags. And finally, we were able to catch our flight and get out of there. But it was probably I remember it being pretty much all day where we had to go through that process just to get on a plane to get out.
Wow. At 17 years old, that's got to be so exciting. Scary, but it was so exciting, right?
Remember, I wanted to be in the military. So I was thrilled. It was scary, but I was excited. I was like, whoa, man, this is crazy. And wait till I get back, because there was no cell phone, so I couldn't tell my friends about it. They knew I was in Panama, but they had no idea whether I was safe, whether I wasn't. There was the power was shut down for a couple of days. We ate cold beans for Christmas on that Christmas that week because there was no power. You couldn't turn your lights on at night because the military was flying Black Dal helicopters around all night. So when I watched what happened in Venezuela the other day, it reminded me of those bombs going off and firefights and all that stuff. And yeah, it was a very crazy time, but it was something that I'm glad that was on my list of things to go through in life.
And that's I guess you call it a life altering moment. That here you are, 17 years old, and you've already described how that influenced you later in your life, seeing that, being proud of our military and proud that our country's willing to stand up for us and protect us, try to get to you to protect you finally. I know it takes a long time, but they may not even have known that, that the Lamb family was there in Panama.
They didn't know. And, what a relief it was to see him. But I'll tell you a couple other things that taught me. And I already knew this. My dad raised me with a healthy distrust for government. But what I realized is the media lies. They were lying all the way along about they were creating, we're right on Noriega's trail and this and that. And the other thing you realize is the fallacy of our government, because you know that the CIA and Noriega were intimately involved. And it wasn't until Noriega said, hey, I'm done with you guys, that now all of a sudden then they removed him from power. And I'm not saying that's the sole reason, but there was certainly a relationship there between what he was doing with the cartels that you were dealing with down in Colombia. So there was a lot of that going on. And what it makes you realize is that we don't have clean hands in a lot of ways throughout the globe. And it also made me realize even more so that I've known for a long time that the media will just lie to the people. And so those are valuable lessons that I've taken with me. I have a saying. I always say it. I said, I don't know. I may not know what the truth is, but I know it ain't what the government's telling me.
I like that. I have to say I agree with that. It's, my partner and I, my old DEA partner, Javier Pena, this is 2026 is our 11th year of traveling around the world. And we do keynote speaking at everything from corporate events to conferences to universities and colleges and theaters and performing arts centers and things like that. But we always have a Q&A at the end so people can ask us direct questions. And it could be about the investigation. It could be about the Narcos series on Netflix. We even talk about our personal families to a certain degree. But the one thing I always try to get across to every audience is don't believe what we're telling you up here, because we're throwing numbers at people. And I tell them, go do your own research and then you decide what you believe. Don't let the media, and especially don't let the government tell you what to believe.
That's right.
Good Lord gave us all brains. You're smart people. You're intelligent. You can make up your own mind, but do your research first. And it seems like today, so many people are just willing to let other people do all the work and like, oh yeah, that sounds like what I'll believe in, not knowing the facts.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly it. The people just buy whatever. I saw an AI thing the other day where it was a video where it said, sheriff and 34 of his high-ranking deputies arrested for corruption. And it was complete BS. The sheriff's name wasn't right. They didn't even mention a sheriff's office. This would have been front page news, by the way, but they put it on like a little Fox thing. And so they made it look like it was kind of a real thing, but it was totally AI. And you could tell just watching it. But though I went to the comments and there were so many people in the comments that believed it. And it's really sad that people are not, you haven't learned at this point. And please, if you're listening to one thing I say today, do not take at face value what you see on social media or the media or any of those things. You've got to do some objective research to figure out what the truth is.
Absolutely. I give you, excuse me, I give you a perfect example. I don't know if you've ever heard of John Mattingly, but he was the police officer in Louisville, Kentucky that got shot. Yeah, good friend. He's been a former guest here on the show. And he is still, to this day, his family and he still live in undisclosed locations because they're still receiving death threats. But that's a prime example about how what I call pretty people, that's, famous people, movie stars, sports stars, whatever they are, and politicians jumping on the bandwagon, taking a position that here's a black lady that was killed by a white police officer without knowing the facts, and it's automatically racism. It's automatically them and us. And John will be the first to tell you that there's absolutely no reason that lady should have died that night. It was the circumstances, and it was her boyfriend. But at that time, even the vice president of our nation sided with that opposition, without knowing the facts. It just, whew.
Well, we've got too many politicians that govern themselves by emotions as opposed to logic, fact, and reason. And we're seeing it right now playing out in Minneapolis. Immediately, people were calling this murder and this and that. No, it was 100% a justified shooting. And this could have been avoided if you weren't out breaking the law by obstructing law enforcement in their duties. And that's exactly what she was doing. And I think we'll find out that she was probably a paid agitator. Now, this is a tragic thing that happened. And I'm sorry that there is a loss of life, especially a mother and a daughter. This is not something that any American wants to see, but it was avoidable on her end. She could have not been there, and that would have been avoidable. And then certainly just could have got out of the car and not tried to run over the agent. And so these are the facts. You got to let emotion. You can't let the mobs and the pitchforks and the torches dictate how you govern as, I don't even want to call them leaders, because they're not. They are just a supervisor, somebody that's put them in charge of something, but they're failing miserably. And then this is why, is because they allow themselves to be governed by emotion as opposed to fact, logic and reason and truth.
Yep. I tell you, and we're going to get into your future here, but I'm to the point where there are extremely few politicians that I have respect for anymore. And if they tell me something, I'm going to go check before I believe whatever it is they're trying to sell.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a little bit. It's kind of a joke, but I always, when I speak, I tell people, I say, look, a lot of people ask me now, Sheriff, what's it like being in law enforcement? Is it hard because of the way the media treats you guys, because of the way the politicians treat you guys, because of the way communities have turned on law enforcement in so many places? And I said, look, 98% of the people we deal with are good people, decent people, normal people. Some of them make mistakes, and unfortunately, we have to hold them accountable. 1% of those people deserve to be in jail. And the other percent deserve to never see the light of day again. And half of that percent need to get out of politics.
Well said. Well, you know what? Again, if I was king for the day, the first thing I would do is put term limits on our Congress. That's, making a lifetime career out of that. And we see people that go up there that, without mentioning names, they can't even afford a place to live. And a few years later, they're multimillionaires. It just,
right. I'm 100% behind that. I've already signed the term limit pledge, but I would also there's two other things that are really important having been in politics. You have to have limitations on campaign finance. The fact that we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars for a job that pays $174,000 is absolutely ludicrous. And tens of millions of dollars. No world does that make sense. That's number one. Number two, there needs to be, and you'll know this because you were in government, you need to have term limits on bureaucrats. If you choose to go above a certain GS level, then you know that there's a time limit on you. So I think you should have a 6-year time limit as a bureaucrat. If you want to take a position that pays you more money and you want to be in a place, we cannot have those people continue to be in this government, because the politicians come and go, but those bureaucrats are the ones that they either push their agenda or they protect their agenda long enough to wait for the politician who's not on their side to leave office so that they can go back to doing what they're doing. So I think bureaucrats and technocrats are just as important to term limit. But I have signed the pledge. I think term limits is something desperately needed. And I will tell you one more thing, and I know we're not even getting to the questions you have yet. The founding fathers, I think the Constitution is so perfect. I mean, what they did, so divinely inspired. Anybody who has read the Constitution, studies it, will realize how a group of men could come together and put such a great document, so short, so concise, yet has governed this country successfully for so long. The only reason we're failing is because we're getting away from the Constitution. But I believe that had they, the reason they did not put term limits in is because they never guessed that somebody would want to spend more time in D.C. because they were farmers. They had homes. They left. They served their country. They wanted to go back as soon as they could. The other thing that they never anticipated were planes, trains, and automobiles. They never knew that it was going to be so easy for politicians to get in and out of Washington, D.C., to make it a career. And so had the founding fathers had foresight to see planes, trains, and automobiles, I promise you they would have put term limits in on those guys.
I certainly believe that. It's, we could go on and on about that. It's frustrating, but it's encouraging to hear that that you're in agreement with the term limits. I just think it's I mean, what happens is those that stay longer become more powerful, and then they bully the new congressman coming in that if you don't do what I say, well, you're never going to get on a committee. You're never going to do this. You're never going to do that. So, but let's get back to your career here. It's, I don't mean to take you down the political road here, but
it's hard not to
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you told us about how you got in law enforcement. How did you select your first agency?
So I owned a business, a pigeon control business. People laugh at it, but it was a good business. But I had to get up on roofs every day, and I would clean people's roofs off, and then pigeon proof them because pigeons, contain like tons of diseases. They're filthy they're filthy birds, and they nest in all these people's houses out here in Arizona. And so I was doing that, but like I told you earlier, something was amiss. I just was missing. I knew that me as a person was destined for more than just going and cleaning people's roofs off. But I didn't know what. And I was trying to find what it was, and I wanted to challenge myself, and I felt like I should be giving something. And so my neighbor happened to be a police officer, and we used to watch UFC fights all the time at my house. And, one of the times he's like, "Hey, man, you should come on a ride along." And I thought, why not? I mean, I'd never thought about being a police officer. Never in my life. Didn't grow up as a kid going, "I'm going to be a cop." Never. It was something that I never thought of. And he goes, "Why don't you come on a ride along?" So we go on the ride along, and it's on an Indian reservation, but the Indian reservation is tucked in right next to Mesa, Tempe, and Scottsdale. So it has that city influence, but it's still an Indian reservation. And we go out there, and it was a graveyard shift. And I remember the first hop tone I ever heard was a call where a dad had found a 20-year-old with his 14-year-old daughter.
Whoa.
So we zip over to the house. The kid had got into a fight, and the guy runs out the back. And so we are now searching for the guy. And they let me out of the car. And so I'm out there armed with a flashlight and courage, walking around in the desert. And I see an old abandoned travel trailer, and I think, I'm going to go look over there. Well, inside of it was a bunch of trash and debris, and I look inside, and amongst all that trash and debris, I see what I think is a quarter size of skin. And I'm like, "Hey, I think this guy's right here." And so they go in there, and they move all the stuff, and sure enough, he's there. And they grab him, they rough him up, they tase him, they put him in cuffs. And I went home that morning, and I woke my wife up, and I said, "Honey, I'm going to be a cop." And 6 months later, I was 6 months later, I was in the academy and on my way to being a police officer. And so that's how I got into the profession. It wasn't that I picked that agency. It just so happened that I went on that one ride along, and this is the only place I knew police officers. And so immediately I thought, yeah, I'm going to put in here. And it was one of the highest paid police agencies at the time, and still continues to be. And so they have a couple big casinos, so they're able to pay their officers very well. And so on all levels, and my wife, people would ask my wife, they're like, "Aren't you worried that it's a dangerous job?" And she said, "My husband's been climbing up on roofs, about fall off almost every day, trying to clean pigeons. I'm much more concerned about his safety now is much more safe than what it was." And the other thing I always tell people is, I always say, look, you can die sitting on a couch eating a bag of chips.
Yep.
Death will find every one of us. You can hide in a corner in a closet all day long, and death will eventually find you. You cannot hide from it. So you may as well take a bite out of life. You may as well live like a warrior and live as a lion's life. And so that's one of my, recommendations to people who think about getting this profession. I said, you're going to die. Everybody will. I would much rather die a warrior's death. I'll be sad if I die an old man and I didn't die at the hands of a bullet or something else. I mean, it's going to be, we live our mentality is different. We want to live a warrior's life. And I finally had found something that I loved it.
Excellent. It's, the way I look at it, when the good Lord says our time's up, it's up. It doesn't matter if we're out fighting crime or, like you said, sitting there on the couch eating a bag of chips.
It doesn't, it will find you. And nobody makes it out. One person came back. He didn't even make it out. He came back. But
Yep.
everybody else, I mean, nobody's making it out. And I watch people live as if they're going to live forever, and they live so cautiously. And I think when they meet their maker again, he's going to say, you didn't do anything. You just sat in a cubicle for 30 years and did a job, and you went home and you drank beer on the Saturday and you went and watched your kids play sports, but you didn't do anything. And I don't want to be that guy. Like, I want to get there and I want to have the Lord look at me and say, whew, that was great to watch. You gave it hell, and great job. And thank you for all you did. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't think of a greater accomplishment than to have the praise of your maker, to know that you took a bite out of the life that he sent you here to take a bite out of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Life's an adventure, brother. Now,
It is.
so you went to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office Academy, is that right?
Yeah. So at the time, the agency where I worked, Salt River, they didn't have an academy. So this is typical for most agencies. So there's 4, 5, 6, 8, different academies in the state. And so at the time, they were sending people to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And so I went to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, but we had people from all sorts of different agencies in our academy class. Yeah.
And you kind of distinguished yourself there at the academy, didn't you?
I did, like, I'm joking around. I was older. I was 34 years old going through the academy, and it was a different experience. I had, experience. I had 5 kids at home, so my approach to it was very different. The games that the instructors would play didn't land on me like they would land on some of the younger kids. And so I knew the line I could push to joke around. And so you find yourself in kind of more of as older as well, people look to you as kind of more of a leader. I ended up being the valedictorian. I wasn't the highest. So in politics, the media will be like, he was not the valedictorian. So there's 2 things with you. Valedictorian is A, you either have the best grades in the class, or B, you gave the speech at the graduation. Well, I gave the speech at the graduation. That's why I was the valedictorian for the class.
There you go. That's something to be proud of. I mean, if you've earned the trust and respect of your classmates, that's a very big badge of honor in my book.
Yeah. And it came full circle the other day. I spoke at the academy in Tucson when the Tucson Academy graduation, SLETC, so the Southern Arizona Training Center. Southern Arizona Law Enforcement Training Center. And so, it was cool. It was it was cool to go full circle back to it. So,
well, so you're working on an Indian reservation. You're non-Indian. How did the Native Americans accept you? Do they accept your authority and who you are, or they just think, oh, here's another white man coming and tell us what to do?
Well, they don't care for authority, period. They don't care for the white man being out there on the reservation telling them what to do. But they also don't care for the natives because they see them as turncoats. And so while there are some phenomenal people, there's also a cross-section of people that fought us all the time. And if anybody that doesn't know how Indian reservations work, there are no misdemeanors. Everything is a felony. But the max sentence at the time that you could serve, which I think Obama changed since then to 3 years, but you had to have a jail that could actually house somebody for 3 years. I think for the most part, it's still 1 year. So unless you do a federal crime that the feds can come in and then prosecute, we actually just the most you could get would be a year. So you could seriously assault somebody. You could do a drive-by shooting, because drive-by shooting wasn't even one of the there's 13 crimes listed on the Indian Crimes Act. And so it had to fall within those. Every now and then you could simulate a state crime. But most people spent no time in jail. So they could fight with us and we could get in a full-on knockdown, drag-out fight, and they'd be out the next morning a lot of times. The judge would release them. And if they ever did get convicted, and it was the oddest thing doing a jury trial on a reservation, because you have 12 natives that are actually jury trial. So you could have a great case and they could still give them a pass. And so What it bred was people fought with us all the time. And gangs was a big, big issue on the reservation. Family, they're born into this stuff. Like, it's not territory. It's, you're a Blood, you're a Crip, you're a Southside 18th Street, you know. And so I quickly gravitated to the gang stuff. And within a couple of years, I was a gang and drug detective and spent most of my time at the Salt River as a gang and drug detective.
Well, I was looking, when I was doing my research on you, I found that on your first year on the job, you were recognized as the Rookie of the Year.
I was the Rookie of the Year. Then I was the Officer of the Year the next year. And then I was the Detective of the Year the next year. And I actually got voted Detective of the Year another year in a row. So 2 years in a row. But by that time, I was on the awards committee. And so I was like, nah, give who's next? Give it to the next person. And so, yeah, I mean, we were very successful. We worked hard. And a lot of it was, I was just older. I had a mission. I had a philosophy that I was already behind the eight ball because I got into the profession later in life and I felt like I had ground to make up. And so I took as many extra shifts as I could. I didn't take those shifts where you sat and watched a movie and watched a construction site, though I didn't want those. Every extra shift I took for the most part was actually working a shift on the reservation in the housing communities, doing all the work. And so by the time we were 2 years in, I had probably put in another year's worth of work that had put me ahead of everybody else that I had gone on with. And so but it was in my mind, I had ground to make up and I had to work hard and fast to get myself to the place where I wanted to be. I didn't know at the time it was sheriff, but, I knew that I wanted to make a difference in this profession.
So you're targeting gangs. Was that where you were getting your most recognition, or was there other specific cases that you were able to attain those recognitions?
Oh, look, we were banging. We were going after the worst people out there. And so we were chasing the boogeyman, and so we had a lot of different cases where we were putting people together. But when I became a detective, they stacked all these drive-by shooting cases on my desk. I mean, I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. It was a stack of files. To put it into perspective, from 2007 to 2010, Mesa, Tempe, and Scottsdale, which surround the reservation, combined for almost 1 million people. In that time frame, they had 58 drive-by shootings between the three cities and 1 million people.
Wow.
In the same time frame, the reservation that had 5,000 people that had lived on it, and it had people that would come in throughout the day, we had 200 drive-by shootings, four times as many drive-by shootings as 1 million people. So we had a major problem, and we weren't solving any of these cases. And so they stack them on my desk, and I'm like, I start going through them, and I start realizing there's, you've worked cases. You start looking for trends. You start looking for, who are the aggressors. And what I started realizing, it was while there was drive-by shootings from all the gangs, it was one gang that was predominantly driving the violence and the drive-by shootings, and a lot of the other ones were reactionary to whatever drive-by shooting had occurred from the other gang. And what we realized, it was the East Side Los Guada Blood gang. And so I went to my people, and I went to the guys that the guy who had actually got me into law enforcement, he now was over at Mesa PD. And so we got together and we actually went to a conspiracy training. I don't remember who taught it, but it was a conspiracy training somewhere. And I was eyes wide open at the edge of my seat listening. And when we got together with the other officer, and I said, man, we got to do a conspiracy case on these guys. That's the only way we can take them down, because what we needed was to pull all these little cases, all the little things they were doing, and make all these little outliers pay for the big ones. So we had to find anybody who doesn't know. So it ended up, we started to look towards a RICO case. There's RICO and then there's conspiracy. Conspiracy is a little baby RICO case, but we end up doing a RICO case, and we had to have a predicate act. And the predicate act that we used was a mother had shown up to pick up her son or one of her children at a party. Well, the party was at a blood household, a blood gangster house. Somebody sees the mom sitting in the car and walks up to one of the other female gangsters, who, by the way, were some of the more violent ones, and says, "Hey, so-and-so's mom's over there in the car." And so they go over and drag her out and beat her within an inch of her life and drag her and leave her in the middle of the street. Now, this street was where the farm trucks would come off early in the morning. And so they left her in the street with the intention that one of the farm trucks might run her over as they were coming out in the morning. Luckily, she didn't get run over. She had some major, health things. But getting natives to be willing to help you in a prosecution is even harder than anything else, because they know that the justice system for them has no teeth. So if you go and you become a witness against somebody, now you're a rat, and it becomes a more difficult. So we worked hard. That became the predicate act. So for anybody else who doesn't understand federal stuff, the predicate act, to involve the federal government, you have to involve interstate commerce. You have to show that there was a violation of interstate commerce. And so what we showed is that the equipment used to treat her at the hospital was made in another state, which then violated we looked at where her shoes were made. We looked at everything that you could look at to figure out how we could involve interstate commerce in this case. But we finally found a connection. And that was our predicate case. And then from there, we just started targeting and going after all these gangsters. We initially started with a list of 30, and we pared it down to the 15 most violent. And we went to all the cities around and found traffic stops or any little crime, petty thing that they had gotten away with. We reopened those cases, and we went we went balls to the wall to try to put the case on these guys.
And what was the result?
We ended up getting the RICO case and got convictions. Along the way, we ended up putting away, I think all 15 spent time, some level of time, some more than others. A bunch of them had taken pleas, but the top two guys that we thought ran the gang, each got, one I think got 27 years in prison, and the other one got a whole bunch in prison as well. So very successful case. And along the way, we put a lot of other people away. Here's the success of that. So I tell you about the drive-by shootings. In 2009, we had 76 drive-by shootings. When we started this RICO case and started putting our proverbial boot in their throat, we went to 2010, we went to 10 drive-by shootings. In 2011, we had 0 drive-by shootings. And in 2012, when I left the agency, we had 0 drive-by shootings. That was the effects of the work that we did against that gang. And it proved the point that I knew, that they were the aggressors. And if we could deal with them, not only would it take care of the aggression, but it would also send a message to the other gangs. The FAFO, you F around and find out. And so we really changed the landscape of violence and crime in that community through that case.
And that's the goal of law enforcement, to make a safer community. Did that increase the respect that the law-abiding Native Americans on the reservation, did that increase the respect for you guys?
For a little bit, but like everybody, they forget really easy. And I was going to tell you one more thing about natives. I started to tell you they're not afraid to fight with you. The one thing that they do is it's a level of respect. You have to learn to respect them, and they will respect you based on how you carry yourself. I wasn't afraid to go hands-on. I always thought that was the safest way for you and for the suspect and myself. The quicker you would neutralize a situation. And so I wasn't a big person to look for a tool on my bat belt. I was trying to neutralize you, and I found the quickest way was to put hands on you. And so that was the amount of injury for them and for me. And so you have a level of respect. even the gangsters know they can't lie to you, or they treat you different on a traffic stop than they would just an average officer. And it was because we had earned their respect. We had earned their respect as warriors, and we had earned their respect as treating them as equal warriors, that we had an honor code. And I didn't bust them down for Mickey Mouse stuff. We had this somewhat of an honor code, and and that respect level is what helped us have success.
Yep. I agree with you 100%. That's what works. So 6 years there, and then you decided to go over to the sheriff's office. Why did you make the switch?
I'm going to get political for a second, but it was during the Obama days. And I felt like Obama was really driving a wedge between law enforcement and the community, communities. And so politically, I was getting motivated I was getting angry. I was watching how quickly, like you mentioned, politicians would quickly jump to a conclusion. And oftentimes that's what the story is after that. During that time frame, we saw a lot of cases that were really in the media. And this was also at the beginning of the body cam stage. And so now there's this whole transition in law enforcement of how this looks. And now all of a sudden in 2011, people started having cameras on their phones. And so everything's starting to change in law enforcement. And I thought the other thing that I saw, that was one of the things. The other side was I saw a lack of leadership in this profession. There were supervisors, but there weren't leaders. There weren't people that were willing to let their career go if they had to stand up for what was right and to back up their people when they were doing the job right. And so I told you I was already older, and so I didn't have the time to work my way through the ranks. And when you do that, you don't earn. So I'm sitting there one day with the gang unit, and all of a sudden I just said to them, you know what? I think I'm going to run for sheriff. And they looked at me and they're like, what? And I go, I think I'm going to run for sheriff. And they go, nah, whatever. And I go, no, man, I'm serious. I'm going to do it. And they go, get out of here. Little do they know, I put in my application to the sheriff's office. Immediately, I put it in, and I did with the intention. That was in 2011. I did with the intention of actually running for sheriff. And so when you talk about, this is something that this new generation, they're very talented in many ways, but they lack that patience that we talked about at the beginning, that good things take time. Good investigations take time. Good life changes take time. So I make this decision in 2011 and then start the series of challenging life experiences. As you're asking a lot from life. Life's going to test your moxie. Life is going to see what you are made of. You want to climb the ladder, the wind starts to blow, and you're going to find out whether you can make it to the top or not. And so we went through some tough times. I took a huge pay cut to go over to the county. And but I had a goal in mind. I knew what I was going to do, and that's what I was focused on.
And what county was this in Arizona?
So I lived in Pinal County, so it was in Pinal County. So I knew that I already lived in the county, so I didn't have to worry about moving. I was driving into the reservation off the county, into a different county every day. And now all of a sudden I'm working in my community. I'm at the sheriff's office now. It took me a little bit of time to get hired for some reason, but finally I got on there in 2012, and I worked for a few years, and then I realized, I told my wife one day, it was getting close to that election time, and I told my wife, I go, honey, if I stay here and they find out that I'm going to run, they're going to start to go after me, and they're going to start to make it to where I look like a terrible cop. And so kind of abruptly, I just, I retired, or I left the agency. I stayed on as a reserve. So I stayed on as a reserve, and then I started building a business so that I could afford to run for sheriff. And as it got closer, I'll tell you this one story, and I know I'm not even giving you a chance to ask any questions, so I apologize.
This is good.
So I get to 2015, and the election is in 2016. So I'm in like August, September of 2015, and I built a sales and marketing company, and a lot of the work we were doing was up in Utah. So I was traveling up to Utah, and I would work there all week with my partner, and then we were working in some other places. And I was sleeping on his couch and just trying to make way, build our business. And I called my wife one day, and the business was doing well. We were finally hitting our groove. And I call her and I go, I don't think I'm going to do it. I think I'll wait. I'll wait till the next cycle. And my wife is super supportive, and she just said, okay, whatever you think. I said, yeah, I've been reading a lot about it. It looks like it sucks, first of all. And number two, it's not a good time. We're making good money. The business is growing. And I'll be darned, I hang up. And for the next 48 hours, I could not shake the feeling of running for sheriff. I could not shake the feeling. I would all day long when I'm working, all night when I'm laying there. And so after like a day or two, I call my wife back, 2 days, I think. And I call her back, and she picks up the phone. I said, screw it. Let's do it. And that was it. Like that was the point where I just decided that we were going to take it to the next level. So
was the current sheriff, was he running again, or was he going to go ahead and retire completely?
So what I did is I gambled on the fact that the current sheriff was going to run for Congress. And so when I put in, there was still talk that he would be the sheriff. And luckily for me, he put in for Congress. And so then I was running against his chief deputy. And, we ran just a phenomenal race. We worked hard. We passed everything out. I was an underdog, a major underdog. Up until the day of the election, people are like, you gave it a good run. I said, man, we're going to smoke this guy. We're going to beat him by 20 points. And they're like, whatever. We beat him 64 to 36%. So
wow.
We beat him by well over 20 points. And then we went into the general election and won by like 20. I said, we'll win the general election by 20,000 votes. We won by 19,979 votes. And so it just was, that was the beginning of it. But yeah, we was the underdog, and we managed to have success.
So when you get elected sheriff, and what do the guys in the gang unit say then?
Look, they were like, whoa, I can't believe you did it, man. This is awesome. I can't believe it. And a lot of people did. But you know what, though? The way I had always carried myself in the academy and at the agency, people weren't really surprised. They're like, yeah, that's Lamb, man. That's Lamb. I've always been a risk taker. I'm not afraid to take risks. I believe that you don't get anything good in life if you're not willing to take risks. And I've been that risk taker, and most people aren't. And most people admire the risk takers. They also try to tear the risk takers down. The people who try to take more out of life, they try to tear you down, mostly because they're unhappy with their own lives and their inability to challenge themselves. But I've always been a risk taker, so I don't think it was a surprise for these guys to see me get into this state. And from there, I'll tell you what, we hit the ground running because they came from a marketing and background, and I had a business background, and I wasn't raised in law enforcement in the sense that I didn't start at 20, 21 years old. My mindset was very different. So the challenge that I faced was reconditioning career government employees to think outside the box and to view things in a very different way. And that really became our success. And I was blessed to have some really great chiefs, friends of mine, men who while they were uncomfortable, they trusted the vision and they trusted it. And as time went on, they learned and they became much better leaders. We all did together. We all became, but we grew from each other, but they grew in the sense that I took them outside of their comfort zones. I drug them out the cave, and then they realized their capabilities were far greater than what they thought they were.
Yeah. Actually, and that's just basic leadership principles you're talking about there. Yeah. And the fact that, are you going to make a mistake? Of course you're going to make a mistake. As I progressed through the ranks of DEA and law enforcement, people would come to me, and if they made a mistake, if it was something we had to address, we'd address it. As long as it's not criminal, quite honestly, in the federal government, it's mostly administrative BS.
Yeah.
But I'd say, okay, what did you do wrong, and what have you learned from this? And of course, they'd tell you, and I'd say, okay, all right, go on, get back to work. Just don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah.
If you do, now we're going to have a longer discussion. But, you're giving people the opportunity to do the job, which that's what they're getting paid to do. You got to prove to them that I'll support you 100%. My first supervisor on DEA, I get stationed in Miami in 1987. Group supervisor calls me in. There was a bunch of us new guys in the enforcement group. And he says, I'm telling you guys right now, when you're right, I got you back. But when you're wrong, you're going to have to answer for it. Well, I don't need you to help be there when I'm right. I can take care of that. It's when I make an honest mistake, I need you to back me up.
That's right.
That was one of those learning lessons. Like, I don't want to be like him.
We used to always tell people, as long as you don't do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, we can fix everything else.
Yes.
And just don't lie about it. Just come in, tell us the truth, tell us what's going on. We can fix that. And Absolutely. We proved to our people. It took time. It's kind of a battered wife syndrome where we had people years later going, well, it's because you guys told us. And I go, when have we done that? That was the other guys. When did we do that? Oh, you haven't. Well, then give us the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
And throughout time, we not only became on an agency level, but on a state level and on a national level, we became recognized as cops. We were out there doing the job. We were having fun, that I had their back. Every time we had a shooting, I would call my guys and I would say, hey, you don't have to tell me anything what's going on. I just want to know if you're okay.
Yep.
And they're like, I'm good, Sheriff. And I'm like, I hear it's a good shoot, but don't talk to anybody until you're comfortable talking to anybody. And we always gave them time, a day, 2 days, get their rep in there. We did the things that you should do for your people, but to call and just make sure that they were okay after something like that meant everything to them. And so, yeah, you always call, and when your chief calls you, you're like, are our guys okay? Yes. Is the suspect dead? No. You're like, oh. Because it creates a lot more problems at that point.
Hey, we joke around in the feds and say if it was easy, we'd let the FBI do it, right?
That's great. That's good.
To all my FBI brothers and sisters, I love you. I'm kidding you. I'm busting your stones here. So, Sheriff, listen, we're going to take a break for now. And listeners, he has agreed to come back tomorrow because we're just now getting him in the position of sheriff. And there's so many things I want to talk to him about. And he's agreed to talk about anything. He told me at the beginning, there's nothing off the table here. So we're going to get into some good stuff tomorrow. Be sure to come back. If you're listening to this and you haven't checked us out on YouTube, do me a favor, go to YouTube, type in Game of Crimes Podcast in the search bar, go down and hit that subscribe button, meet some of our guests. You can see the videos there. If you like what you see, hit the like button and send me your comments. Like I always say, I'll read your comments. I know we're not supposed to, but I do. But, and I may even respond. But the ugly ones, I ain't responding to that. You might get blocked. But thank you, folks, anyway, for coming over every week to support us. Be sure to come back tomorrow. This man here, like I said at the very beginning, he needs no introduction. He's well known throughout the United States for doing the right thing, not for being infamous for something else. So come on back tomorrow and we'll finish this up. In the meantime, stay safe out there. God bless.